Hey guys, how's it going? Hassan here, back with another video. And in today's video, I would like to cover the topic of PageSpeed Insights and whether it's useful for Shopify stores. Performance and speed is kind of a big topic, and there's a lot of tooling around that you can use to measure how fast um, your site loads. And as I mentioned before, there's a strong correlation between how fast your site loads and the number of conversions you get and how user experience the site. So it's a really important fact to consider when you're developing your website. Um, so I'm going to cover whether one of those tools called Google PageSpeed Insights is actually useful for Shopify stores. So let's first go over what is Google PageSpeed Insights. It's just a speed testing tool that you can use to ascertain how your users are experiencing your website in terms of how fast it is. Basically, you enter URL in here, you click analyze, and it'll give you a score out of 100 as to how well your website is doing compared to their database of sites, which, because it's Google, essentially almost every site on the web is on there, so you get a good indication of how fast your website is compared to the other sites. They use three to four metrics they use to gather this score. The first one is largest content for paint, LCP. So this just means how long it takes for the largest image in the initial viewport to load. So if I give you an example, you go to my website here. So the biggest image when I initially load the page is the image of myself here when I was a lot younger. Okay, this loads pretty fast. But if you were to visit the site for the first time, it would take this image would take the longest to load. Or you wouldn't notice it because it's so quick on my internet connection. But if you were to throttle the internet connection, you'll see that maybe this one takes the longest to load. So this just measures how long the biggest image takes to load. And then there's cumulative layout shift, which is how the elements on a website move. So ideally, you don't want them to move as the page loads. You want them to kind of load it like from top to bottom, so that nothing's shifting around and it doesn't look off. So that's essentially cumulative layout shift. I'll provide definitions for these core metrics in a link in the description. And then there's first input delay, which is how long it takes before the page becomes active, becomes usable. So if you load, let's say I load allbirds.com, which is a popular Shopify store. So for a moment there, I couldn't click on everything. You might not notice it, but for a moment there, I couldn't click on anything because it was rendering the page. So that time it takes for the page to become responsive to user input, that's first input delay. And then there's also first content for paint, which is how long it takes for the first pixel to load on the page. It's another important metric. So if you score well in those metrics, then you have a good performance score. My website's quite light, so that's why I have quite a good score here. And then they have a list of things that you can implement to try and improve your score. So it's called the diagnostic section. So that's essentially PageSpeed Insights. It's a very popular tool that people use, and it's incorporated into a lot of different platforms, not just Shopify. Okay, so is it useful for Shopify? So let's start answering this question. So for SEO purposes, if you want to rank highly on Google and you want to rank highly on ads, Google Ads, then it is useful for Shopify stores, because for most stores, if you rank highly for your keywords, then you'll make more sales. You get more visits, and inevitably you'll get more sales. It's quite hard to get that ranking boost because you have to score in the good category, ideally. So that's 90 out of 100 plus for those core vitals, LTP, CLS, FID. So it's quite tricky. It's possible, but it's tricky to score so highly. and I'll go through the reasons why it's tricky for a Shopify store specifically. So there's a huge variance in scores that you can get, even if you do the test at the same time using the same computer, like the same everything pretty much, and you'll still get a variance in scores. And it's it's quite off-putting if you put in a lot of work into your improving your site speed, and one day you test your site once and you get 90 out of 100, and you test it again a few seconds later and you get 70 out of 100. So it's very odd. And they have an explanation for this in a link provided here. And essentially, the web server, it depends on your web server that you're using. So your server might stop if it's got lots of requests going in at once, then it might stop or hold a number of requests, so that those requests can finish and then your requests can come in. So it depends on the time of day or when. So you always get variance in the scores essentially. There's also third-party requests. So in Shopify, you kind of need to have that. It's very rare to find out a Shopify store that doesn't use apps or doesn't use third-party software to help with the store. I think Shopify by default has some third-party requests installed, so it's kind of necessary for e-commerce stores to have this. And the servers that these third-party requests use also have that variance, as in they have lots of requests coming in at once, and they might throttle some requests, or they might be slower than usual. So there's not much you can do really. If you have app A/B tests running, let's say for example you have A/B tests where you test only 50% of the users that go onto your website. That means, let's say you test the website once, maybe you're part of the A/B test once, and then the second time you visit the website, you're no longer part of the A/B test. So you get that massive variance in scores. So it's really hard. There's massive variance in scores, and these are the scores that I got from my site. So I got 98 one time, and it was 70. I've got even lower before, but just not in the ones I did a few in the last half an hour. So with these variance in scores, it makes it very tricky to actually ascertain whether your changes to your site are actually improving your site speed or not. So they actually recommend, if you click on this link here, it's quite a lot to read, but if I recommend giving it a read, and explains why there's such a big variance in scores. But they recommend essentially testing it 5 times. So instead of running the test once, you run it 5 times and take the average of those scores. So I guess I would score somewhere in the kind of 80 region, which is pretty good. It's still not 90, but it's good enough. It's pretty good. So essentially you're going to have to test this multiple times. One test is just not good enough because of this variance. With Google PSI, they give you very limited options in terms of visiting your site from your customer's perspective. So this is actually a golden rule in kind of site speed, which is in measuring site speed, which is you want to measure the speed that your users experience the web page, how your customers experience the web page, not how, let's say you sell your products to people in the USA. You don't really care how users in China or Japan experience your website in terms of the speed. You care about the people in the US that actually experience your website. And there's a good book about this actually. It's not an entire book about it, but it's gives the first chapter speaks about this very topic. It's called Using Web Page Test, and I give a recommendation for using this tool later on in this video. But on the very first page, it says the true speed, referring to the speed of a web page, is that which the real users of the page experience. Real users live all over the world, use different technologies like device type or browser, and connect to the internet differently. The true speed of this amalgamation is extremely hard to reflect in a single test. So essentially, same message as before, don't use a single test, and try to make it specific to your customer or your user that you're targeting. So PSI doesn't allow you to build a highly specific customer profile when running the test. So it doesn't allow you to choose the location that the user visits from. It doesn't allow you to test to change the device or the internet connection or remove certain requests. And web page test actually gives you those tools, so you can cater your test for your specific customer. So PSI is not great in that instance. Also, the diagnosis is very vague. I mean, I've done some testing, some site speed improvement for a few other stores, and I've fixed all the diagnostics, but my score decreased, and I didn't understand that, and I tested it multiple times. I did the 5-test rule that I mentioned before, and the score still on average decreased by fixing all the diagnostics. And we're actually doing something not in the diagnostics that actually increased the score. So it's very confusing. I think this advice is very general. They don't tailor it specifically to your site. They just have like an algorithm running that says, okay, if the time taken is less than 20 seconds for blocking time, then show this diagnostic kind of thing. In my experience, that's how it's been. So the diagnostics is useful in a general sense, but if you want to cater it specifically for your customer, it's not, I would say, that useful. So Speed Booster is it's a great website, and they provide a similar service to myself, and I'd recommend using them if you ever want to give it a try. But the case study where they actually improved the site speed, but it resulted in a lower score. So I put a link here. I put it in the description also, so you can read about this. So, should you care about PSI score on your Shopify store? Is it something you should consider? So the answer is yes or no. Yes and no. So for SEO reasons, yes, you have to consider it because it's a ranking factor for Google. As for how your user experiences the site or how fast your actual site speed is for your user, no, it's not that useful. You shouldn't really care about it. For how your users actually experience your site, you should consider using web page test. So if I show you web page test here, it's very easy to use. You just enter in your URL here, and then you can choose the kind of where you want the test to run from. So I want someone from Mumbai, India to visit my site, and I want to see how they experience the website using a 3G connection. And then if you click on advanced configuration, you can really configure the test location to give you a number of different countries to choose from. So let's say, I don't know, London, because I'm in the UK. So I want the test user to visit from the UK, and I want it to use, let's say I'm targeting all users from the UK, London, using the Chrome browser. And I want them to use a 4G connection. We don't care about the dimensions because it should be a mobile. Number of tests, you can run multiple tests. So I'm going to choose 5. And you want the first view. So that means the users that are visiting the site for the very first time. And then if I click on advanced here, where are we? No, sorry, Chromium here. So I want to emulate a mobile browser. I don't really want it to be a desktop one because I think most Shopify or e-commerce traffic comes from mobile. So I want them to visit from using an iPhone X. And there's a bunch of different other configurations that you can use. Maybe in a future video, I will give you a more advanced overview of how to use this tool. And then I click Start Test. A test will begin, and then it will give me a score, and then I'll get a better understanding of my site speed for my users. So let's wait for this test to finish. So it gives me a very similar kind of metrics as Google's PageSpeed Insights. Gave me an LSP speed index, and it gave me a waterfall chart here, which is great. These are just, it looks a bit complicated, but these are all the connections or the requests that are running as my site is loading. And as you can see, there's a 404 error here, which shouldn't be here, so I should probably fix that. And maybe I got another video on waterfall charts that you can check out. And it also gives you like a visual page loading view, so you can see what it looks like from a user perspective. You can see from 0 seconds of nothing, then there's nothing, then there's nothing, and then at maybe 1.75 seconds, that's when the initial viewport shows my website. So I find this tool is a lot more elusive and comprehensive if you know what you're doing. Okay, that's it. Hopefully this helps. I do offer site speed optimization services. Feel free to click on the link in the description if you want to have a chat with me about how to improve your site speed. Thank you very much for listening.